a sovereign citizen, dude. What's happening, guys? I'm a sovereign citizen from Centrifugal. I know all about the gold fringe and how fraudulent it is.
They hit me with a really strong dose of OC spray.
I want to speak to you, dead soldiers, now! I know the laws, buddy, and I'm waiting for you to do something wrong so I can sue your department.
I pay for that uniform, I pay for that car, I'm the taxpayer, right?
Okay, everybody, how's it going? We have a first in the entirety of the history of Flat Earth versus Globe Earth. We have a Flat Earther on the panel, and the Globe Earther is a no-show. So I don't know where Jack is. He's been given the link, and still nothing from Jack. So what we're going to do in the meantime is we're going to let Flunchy give a little talk, and I guess he's going to want to, call out Jack as a no-show. In the meantime, anybody in the chat, if you want to come on and test your wits against Flunchy, then let it be known in the chat, and we'll try to get you a link. Take it away, Flunchy.
Thank you. Over. Yeah, no, I kind of had a feeling he wasn't going to show. I mean, let's face it, most of you Globe Earthers are, I don't want to say afraid, that just sounds rude, but you can't handle the truth, so it really doesn't surprise me that he's not here.
Yeah, well, go ahead and present your arguments, and we'll see if we can get someone in. And if not, I guess Flat Earth wins.
Well, I mean, there's the obvious one. Water finds its level. As long as it's not disturbed, it will be flat and level. Then, of course, there's horizon always rises to eye level. No matter how high up you go, the horizon will always rise to eye level. I mean, then, of course, according to the globe, people in Australia are somehow standing upside down without falling off into space.
Looks like Ilya Moon is willing to debate you.
Ooh, she sounds hot. Pretty girls scare me there. I'm kind of blushing right now.
Well, yeah. You're... does your mom allow you to debate pretty girls?
I don't know. I'm only 30 years old, but you can bring her on. I'll try to look at my screen.
So Dave, can you get a link to Mrs. Moon? I'm assuming Mrs.
I can do that, definitely.
So in the meantime, Professor Phil Bell is in the chat. Welcome, Professor Bell, and look for an email from me. I've got an idea that I want to talk to you about, sir. And yes, Professor Bell, this is a lot like when QE chickened out of the debate with you after saying that he was going to show up.
Well, I have sent Ilya the link now, so Ilya, check your DMs on Discord.
Well, maybe when she gets there, she can explain to me how on a globe, an airplane doesn't just fly off into space without dipping its nose every however far.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, you would at least have to be, past first grade to understand that.
Well, yeah, I passed first grade, but, after like grade 9-ish, when it started to get more complicated, just kind of stopped paying attention, because that's when it starts to just kind of be more indoctrination than anything. I mean, it makes sense in like the earlier stage where they tell you real things, like they teach you the language that's, native to where you are, and you learn real math that you can use in everyday life. But once you start putting letters and stuff in it, kind of, it depends on the math really, but a lot of it's just kind of complete bull crap.
Yeah, well, it looks like Ilya joined for a second and then dropped back out. There could be some technical difficulties, so let's see what happens.
Well, if she can't get in, she can do what I did. Like obviously I don't have unlimited, and you know my Wi-Fi is kind of crappy. I just went down to the McDonald's here. I'm just sitting just outside, hooked up to their Wi-Fi.
Well, you mean after your shift there?
Oh, no. I did, like, I worked not at this one, but I worked at another McDonald's once, but I got fired because I kept on trying to tell people that the earth was flat. It really pissed me off.
So while we're waiting for Ilya to rejoin, what do you think of some of the, the flat earthers, some of the more notable ones, Quantum Eraser, any of the Nathans? Just give us a quick assessment.
Well, I mean, first up, I'm not really a biblical flat earther. Like, I mean, I'll give them that. That to me doesn't really, like, the Bible saying something is, I'm not going to take that for its word. I'm more of like a science guy. Like, I like the experiments that prove that there's no motion. I like the measurements that we've taken that show that the sun is close and small. And yeah, Nathan Thompson, like, you know, even I think he's a complete moron. He deserves to be locked up. That's coming from another flat earther.
Okay, well, we have Ilya. Mic check.
Hello.
Hey.
Okay. So since we're kind of doing this as freeform, I guess it's going to be more of an open discussion, a talk and let talk type thing. I'll step in if I need to, but otherwise, let's do this as a free-form discussion of open ideas.
Sure.
Well,
I just want to say that I don't think that flat earthers are necessarily people who believe in science, because it's not really an education thing. It's about distrusting authorities and institutions. And it seems to be based on both conspiracy mentality and a deeply held belief that looks a lot like religiosity. And it isn't necessarily specifically tied to a religion. So even though you say you're not religious and you don't follow that path, I don't see any flat earther out here who is presenting any evidence that's based on education and science. What I see is a lot of conspiracy theorists who are out here with a deeply held belief within a conspiracy theory against authorities and institutions. So how can you explain the flat earth model, or the lack thereof actually, and its existence in an educational way that doesn't sound like a conspiracy theory?
So I just drinking some pop there. Well, no, and I understand where you're coming from. I mean, like, I only heard about this about a year and a half, 2 years ago, and until then, I love space. I love NASA. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Then, you know, I really did some research, and I saw some things that just didn't add up. And, you know, after between 5 and 6 months, I couldn't debunk it. So I just thought, yeah, there's something to this. And then after that, I've just done more research and I've seen more videos, and the more and more I look into it, the more it makes sense, and the less sense the globe makes. I mean, like, for the love of God, you guys say that the moon phases are caused by the shadow of the Earth. Well, if that's the case, then how in the hell do you explain a gibbous moon phase if it's the shadow of the Earth? Is the Earth like concave now, or what's up with that?
Mrs. Moon?
I hit the wrong button. I was double muted, literally. Oops. So the moon phases are primarily built around the shadows of the Earth. When Earth casts its shadow on the moon, that's when you see different things. like lunar eclipses. But when you're looking at the primary and intermediate moon phases, each one is a little bit different. So as an example, a moon phase starts with an invisible new moon. The first visible moon is the phase of a thin silver, which is the waxing crescent moon. After a week and a half, the moon's surface is illuminated at the first quarter moon. So the illuminated parts continue to grow for 14 to 15 days based on the entire face of the moon until it's lit up entirely into a full moon. Now, the illuminated part then gradually shrinks into a waning gibbous moon. And when it reaches the third quarter, the opposite half from the first quarter, it then becomes illuminated. From there, it fades into the waning crescent moon. And finally, the moon disappears completely from our view into another new moon phase. So it's based on the time of year, the quarters, and it's based on the position of the moon and the earth in relation to the sun.
Yeah, and you see, that's what I thought at one point too, kind of. But again, too, even with that, I mean, if it's supposed to be a full moon and it's supposed to be on the other side, then it should always be dark because the Earth's in between the sun and the moon. And that just makes no sense. The heliocentric model, just all of it, just makes little to no sense.
Well, have you ever done an experiment with somebody else on the opposite side of the world when it comes to the moon? Because moon phases are the same all over the world.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they aren't.
The same percentage and area of the moon are illuminated no matter where on Earth you are. However, the moon is rotated in different ways depending on the time, the day, and your location, and the moon's position in the sky. Therefore, the illuminated part of a waxing gibbous moon can appear on the left, the right, top, or bottom, dependent on where it is in the sky. And the line or curve dividing the illuminated and dark parts of the moon is called the terminator. And the terminator of the waxing gibbous moon can be on the right side, left, or top. So again, it all is going to be depending on the time, date, your location, and the moon's position in the sky.
Oh, well, yeah, I know that, but I'm saying on a flat Earth, you can still get the same thing. Like, let's say, there's me up in Canada, and I'm looking south, and I see the moon in the sky. Well, now someone who's in, let's say Australia, once the moon kind of circles around and gets a bit closer to them, they can look up and they'll see the moon kind of the opposite way too. I mean, it's really more, what I'm starting to think it is more of a disk in the sky, really.
Okay, so these symbols reflect the moon's appearance in the northern hemisphere, which can be confusing for people in the southern hemisphere where the opposite side may be illuminated. Again, you're going to see the exact same thing depending on where you are. However, it may be on the opposing side of what the northern hemisphere sees if you're in the southern hemisphere, but it's still going to be the same moon phase.
No, I know. I never said it wouldn't be the same moon phase. I'm just saying I don't think that's what the cause of the moon phases are.
Okay, so what do you think the causes are? If you don't think that it's a shadow being cast by the Earth, what do you think it is?
Well, no. So what the moon phases are, it's basically because the moon, it's a disk, and it provides its own cooling light. And so what it does is as it circles around the Earth, and it kind of varies between the tropics depending on the time of year. But basically what a lot of people, and I'm kind of starting to come to this conclusion myself, is that it's kind of a dark moon that basically kind of comes and it starts to cover part of it. And so that way you can't see all of it. And we don't know exactly what it is, but it's theorized that it's there. And kind of like when you see either when there's a new moon or just whenever there is a lunar eclipse, that's basically just the dark disk moon. I don't really have a name for it off the top of my head, but basically it kind of covers it, and that's what we're thinking.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Do you believe that the sun emits heat?
Oh, it does. Absolutely.
So if the moon emits cold air, then why is it that we have seasons? Why isn't it hot in the day and cold at night when the moon's out?
What is cold at night when the moon's out? It
No.
starts off. Yeah, well, it's not. Well, no, I'm not saying it drops down to like -100 or anything. But what I'm saying is, when the sun's out during the day, it's generally warmer during the day than at night.
Have you done any studies whatsoever to measure if there is any coolant emitting from the moon? 1, 2, if the moon is illuminating itself and it's not a reflection from the sun, or 3, that the moon phases are not based on the earth casting shadow. Have you done any? Because there's a lot of evidence that scientists have done, that NASA has done, that regardless, that walk us through what the moon phases are and what they represent. So have you done anything to have evidence behind what your claim is?
Yeah, if there's a moon, like, let's say it's a full moon or close to a full moon, and if you get something and you get out like a laser thermometer or something, and you put something in the shade, point it at that, it'll usually be a couple degrees warmer than something that if you point the laser thermometer at and it's not in the shade, usually that'll be a little bit cooler.
Yeah, but
so many videos on YouTube.
Okay, so there are so many different things that can cause that phenomenon that has nothing to do with what's not being emitted from the moon. I mean, because the moon does not emit air at all, cold or hot. So.
Yeah, and see, like that, and that's the thing, though, is like, I mean, I'm just saying, every time the moon is out, it is colder, and you can go measure it. Just grab a laser thermometer.
It's colder because the sun has gone down, and the sun is not shining on that part of the earth.
Well, no, I mean, the sun hasn't gone down. It's just really moved away. Because, okay, basically, I'm not sure if you understand our model, so I think once I do that, you might... Yeah, I mean...
No.
Well, no. So basically, now a lot of flat earthers don't agree on a map, but the one I've seen that kind of makes the most sense is it's basically the Gleason map, and that one's basically just like an azimuthal equidistant projection. But I noticed people were saying before that the sizes weren't always right, and if you look at Mark Sargent's, he actually adjusted the sizes because he's really smart. Like, he knows his stuff when it comes to the flat Earth, and he adjusted the sizes accordingly so that the land masses are what we actually see. However, it is still flat, and all the distances are all the exact same. And basically, above that, it's a disk, right? And so you have the sun, which in summer it circles around the Earth on the Tropic of Cancer, and so for people in the northern hemisphere, such as myself, it's warmer because the sun is closer. And again, the sun's, roughly 5,000 kilometers in the sky. So obviously then in winter, when it moves further away to the Tropic of Capricorn, where it's, at 23 degrees south, it's further away. So of course it gets, of course it's going to get colder at night, and then it's going to just get colder for longer periods of time, like in winter.
I mean, did you just graduate from Flurfica G School of Flurf?
I have no idea who that is.
Because right now it sounds like you're just taking a lot of what Mark Sargent has said and is just repeating it.
Well, yeah, but that's what you globe earthers do. You just take what NASA tells you and repeat it too.
No, we don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, like, for instance, like, also, she was saying in one of his other videos, too, that, well, you know the movie The Truman Show? Hello? Nope.
Looks like maybe Mrs. Moon dropped. I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, she messaged me. Her net dropped.
Oh.
I did put out a message in the chat that anybody else who may want to take on Flunchy, let me know. We can get you a link. There's a lot of people talking trash in the chat, so let's see what happens. Otherwise, go ahead and finish your point there, Flunchy.
Well, basically, yeah, it's just Mark Sargent's. Where was I there? Oh yeah, so he had his AE map, and his AE map, and yeah, the sun basically just circles around it, and it goes from summer, and it circles around the Tropic of Cancer, and then it goes down to the Tropic of Capricorn in winter, and that's basically what causes the seasons.
Well, real quick while we wait for someone, what do you think about the fact that on the equinox, the sun rises due east and sets due west for everyone on Earth? That kind of throws a lot of cold water on the whole sun going over the Capricorn and Cancer. That wouldn't happen on those models. So what do you think about that?
Sorry?
Okay, so on the okay, well, try to follow along. So on the equinox, no matter where you are on Earth, if you look at the sun rise, it's going to rise exactly due east and set exactly due west, which can't happen on the model that Mark Sargent was proposing.
But how do you know that it always sets due west everywhere on the planet? Have you been everywhere on the planet?
I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a career sailor, so yes.
Okay, well, do you have any evidence of that?
I can show you my DD-214 that shows that I was a lifelong sailor.
Okay. Well, in that case, though, if you're a sailor as you claim, then, so how do you know what? Well, how do you know that the sun's really far away then, as they claim? I mean, because if you guys use the stars and all that to navigate, then you should know that the stars are far away, the sun's far away. I mean, realistically, you can use a sextant, and the stars, if you see them on the dome, you can just use that, and you can find the distance above the horizon, and you can kind of find out where you are.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I was looking in the chat to see if anybody else wanted to come in and get a crack at the old Flunchy there. Dave, can you be looking at that if I'm going to fill in for Ilya while she's trying to reconnect?
Yeah. Anyone in the chat, just at me. I'm gonna comment in the chat real quick here. So if you want in, just at me, and I will send you a link or DM me on Discord.
Yeah, Professor Bell has a question in the chat. But first, I'm going to answer your question. So you're asking about using a sextant to look at the North Star, I'm supposing.
Yeah,
was that the gist of your question?
Yeah, well, because Polaris is right at the direct center, so it's right at the North Pole, the celestial North Pole.
It's pretty close, and actually, for right now, it's getting a little bit closer, and then it's going to start to get farther away again. And you can look at this by looking at star charts back throughout history. It used to not be the North Star. Polaris is what we're talking about, and pretty soon, we got Stroker Assaulter says that he will debate you. But Dave, if you could get with him. Okay, and so, yeah, all we have to do is shoot a bearing to Polaris, and that'll tell you your latitude anywhere in the world. And that only happens if the Earth is spherical. This has been debated over and over. You can draw it out on paper. That doesn't happen on a flat Earth. So also, you can just look at your longitudinal lines as you travel north or south from the equator. Your longitudinal lines will converge. And our nautical charts are accurate, or else we would be getting lost. And we don't get lost because our nautical charts are accurate. So longitudinal lines in and of themselves crush the flat Earth.
Yeah, and that's what people say when it comes to the southern hemisphere. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I don't see it, and there are lots of flat earthers in the southern hemisphere too. So if that was true, wouldn't they have noticed? Because they're all looking for the truth too. So there's no reason that if they didn't notice that they wouldn't have said something.
Well, apparently, flat earthers don't listen when people talk. I was talking about longitudinal lines in the northern and southern hemisphere as you approach the poles.
Well,
Either,
no. What I'm saying is, I agree with you in the north. Yeah, they do converge, obviously. Or sorry, yeah, they converge, and then they diverge the further south you go, all the way until basically the end.
okay, well, I can tell you from firsthand experience that they do not do that.
Do you have any videos of that, or?
I'm sorry to tell you, but career sailors such as myself, we don't even know, well, until the last few years, um, uh, flat earthers aren't a thing. We don't think to take pictures and video to prove. So, for example, um, my assault rifle that I have never taken video to prove the muzzle velocity of my assault rifle, because there's I'm sure if you look on deep enough into the internet, you can find anti-gunners that say guns don't work. It's the same with us on the bridge of a warship. We don't even know that you people are there until I fell down this rabbit hole.
Well, yeah, I mean, of course, most people won't know about it or think about it because basically, just since you go to school, you're shown that the Earth's a globe. You're shown some things, and then a lot of people don't think about it. They just kind of blindly believe it. And then until you really start to think about it, a lot of it doesn't make any sense. Like, first off, I mean, like, aside from all that, it's like, let's move to the fact that they said the Earth is supposedly, orbiting around the sun and it's rotating at like, a bit over 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. Like, if that was the case, we'd be flying off. Have you never, just, take a ball, just like a tennis ball, and put it in water, and then just throw it there and spin it around? That shit goes flying off in every direction. Why the hell do the oceans just stay here? Have you ever seen a picture of, like, a nice, calm body of water? How in the hell does that happen if it's spinning that fast?
Okay, well, if you go onto my YouTube channel, you'll find a video called "Can You Even Centrifugal, Bro?" And in that video, I took a gunpowder scale that goes out to 4 decimal places, and I calibrated it at my home in Virginia. And I had a 50-gram reference weight, and I weighed it 50 grams, obviously. And then I flew to Honolulu, Hawaii. Sorry, I'm getting texts. So I flew to Honolulu, Hawaii, which is farther from the equator, or I'm sorry, farther from the pole. So you would expect it to be lighter because of more centrifugal force from the spin of the Earth. And of course, it was less than 50 grams. And then I flew from there to New Hampshire and weighed it again. And New Hampshire is closer to the pole than Virginia, so you would expect it to weigh more than 50 grams. And of course it did. And so these measurements coincided with the spin of the Earth. And so what say you? I mean, I was weighing this out to 4 decimal places. How do you account for this disparity in the weight based on my latitude?
Well, was it an electronic scale, or?
Yes, it was an electronic scale.
Well, if it's electronic, then how do you know that, like, NASA or the government didn't put something in it to kind of know where you are, so that way you can change it a little bit?
I because these scales are made to measure gunpowder for people who reload their own ammo, as I do. So if they change based on where you are on Earth, then some people's guns are going to blow up in their face, and other people's guns are not going to even get the projectile out to the specific distance that they're supposed to fire. Oh, for Christ's sake!
You know that like NASA or the government didn't put something in it.
Sir, mic check.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, and thank you for sparing me from this headache that I'm getting.
Well, I'll do the best I can, my friend. So my name is Michael. I'm also in Canada, and I'm also ex-military, so I have a slightly different perspective than you do because I was in the artillery, so I've seen how the Earth is round.
Well, okay, you've seen how the Earth is round. Have you ever seen actual curvature from side to side?
Okay.
Have you seen orthogonal curvature before?
Hold on. So let's just agree on a couple things first. The only people that could have actually physically, conceivably seen that with their own eyes were people in the atmosphere in space. Because you'd have to be so far away from the Earth to physically see that on your own. The only people that could have possibly seen that were the Mercury astronauts, definitely the Apollo astronauts. And then again, that all works if you're going to buy into the we did or did not go to space thing, and which is another argument in and of itself. So, like, which conspiracy theory do you wish to play out first?
I was more curious because you just said people in the atmosphere in space.
Yeah.
I thought you guys claimed that space was the absence of atmosphere.
Well, okay, sorry, bad word use. But so, like, in the atmosphere, right, you get to a certain spot where you stop having a breathable atmosphere and the effects of gravity are lessened because you're farther away from the Earth. And then if you have the right technology, you slip out into low Earth orbit. And then if you have even significantly more technology and the right telemetry, you then go into the orbit of the moon or out into Saturn or out into whatever part of space, depending on the flight plan that's been scheduled for you.
Okay. No, and like I get what you mean there. Like, I'm not going to get into like the moon landings being faked and all that because I just want to talk about the shape of the Earth right now. But no, I wasn't referring to seeing the entire Earth at once. I was just saying, like, seeing actual like curvature, like from left to right. Like, you see a lot of pictures. Like there was the Red Bull jump where what was his name again? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know of. I don't know who, but yeah.
And he went up.
What about anyone that's climbed Everest and stood at 28,000 feet?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I mean, I've heard people say that you have to be above 35,000 feet or up above like 100,000 feet. Like even the pictures from 120,000 feet, I've never seen any curvature.
How many miles? 120,000 feet. What flies? I'm just going to quickly Google something because I don't even know what flies at that height.
Well, it would just have been like it wasn't like a plane or anything. It was like weather balloons and stuff. And
okay, yeah. So I've got a couple of questions, and I don't mean to be picayune or pedantic, but because there's many schools of thought within the flat Earth, right? And I watch a lot of videos, and some of it I enjoy, and some of it's just just intellectual chicanery. So let's just go back to the Antarctica thing, because I just want to understand this, right? Where do you fall on Antarctica? Does it exist or doesn't exist, or is it an ice wall? Right? Like, which part of the flat Earth do you fit into?
Oh, well, no, I mean, I think it's there, obviously, because, well, I think it's there, and I think it's the ice wall. Because the ice wall is what keeps everything from falling out, right? Like, because you know, back like I remember back when I was in school, and when they were teaching us the shape of the Earth, they'd say, you know, the first thing that comes to mind is boats and water falling off the edge of the Earth, which is obviously just stupid going into space, because I really don't think space exists. But no, so I think there is the ice wall there, because again, it kind of keeps everything in. Then of course you have the Antarctic Treaty from NASA, just saying that no one can go there. And I mean, personally, I've heard stories, not from people I know, but I have heard stories of people trying to go there and just getting turned away at gunpoint.
By whom?
I forget the name. It's just some stories on the internet.
Okay, so you have an unsubstantiated story from a person that says they attempted to go to Antarctica.
Well, it wasn't just a person; it was a group of people, and I've seen it.
Okay,
I've
so
seen a couple of stories.
So then some type of flotilla shows up of an armed force that was belligerent to them, puts them at gunpoint in international waters. So you now have Antarctic pirates? Because I have friends that are former Canadian Navy, a couple friends that are former American military and whatnot. If there was a series of ships from NATO or tasked by the UN, those ships would be in a registry, and people are going to notice, well, my husband or my wife or whoever, they've been gone for 6 months, and magically no one's allowed to communicate with that ship, because soldiers can't keep secrets. There's a reason why you don't tell privates things. They don't keep their mouths shut. So if you're going to try to tell me that, you know, the U.S. Navy has, and I'm just going to spit a number, 15 ships and 10,000 personnel working in a flotilla, and the Brits have 6 ships and, you know, 6,000 personnel. Well, Canada, we have not a lot, so we can't do that. But if you're going to try to tell me there's some international flotilla manned under a multinational command, that there's just go down there and herd people away, I'm sorry, at that point, you're going to have to fight proof, like a route order, movement orders, radio traffic, fuel logs. Because
but yes, yeah, and I get what you're saying there, but what I'm saying is, like, you know, keep in mind it's 2020 now, right? Like, it's we have so many different things we could do that aren't that you don't need manpower for. So you don't have to have people literally on these boats all the time just to constantly watch for people. You can just have systems in place where, if, let's say, you know, something is sensed that there's going to be a ship or something coming this way, you just send out some people, and then you can significantly reduce the amount of people that you need. So you're telling the secret to a lot less people. And then, of course, with the fuel logs and all that, well, I mean, if, you know, NASA is going to do that, there's no, or any government for that matter, I should say, there's no real reason they would have to tell anyone that fuel log, because, again, they're kind of going to be in on it. There's, like, I don't see who they would tell. They're just going to get it from whatever company. They're going to pay the company. The company's not going to ask questions because they got their money. And
no, because for example, a friend of mine who's former Canadian Navy, the ship would be in port every 10 days. They'd be in a different port. So if they started out on the west coast of Canada, we'll say leaving from the Vancouver Island area, they might stop a couple or 3 times going down the American seaboard, maybe for training, maybe for fuel. But again, they'd have to stop every so often to take on a certain amount of fuel. And they're buying this fuel in foreign countries. They're buying it at a civilian port. Like, Canada doesn't have a military treaty, and nor does the States with Brazil or Argentina. So they're pulling into an Argentinian port, and if Schrodinger is next Navy, he can correct me on this, but they're pulling into an Argentinian port or a Colombian port and going, hey, fill up my boat. Right? You're totally buying that fuel on the economy. Or you're pulling into an Argentinian naval base where you've already got an agreement where we're going to take on X number of thousands of gallons of fuel and so many tons of food, but you're buying that off the Argentinian economy. And if you're not, you're getting it off. Yeah.
Yeah, if I could butt in for just a minute on this topic, I did the math on what it would take to patrol a 60,000 mile, as the consensus of flat earthers say, 60,000 mile ice wall. And the math that I came up with is that we would need, based on my firsthand experience of sector defense, you would need about 10,000 naval ships. And the U.S. Navy, which is probably, you know, one of the biggest navies in the world, has about 250 serviceable naval ships. So you're talking about exponentially larger Navy than even the United States has. And then you expand out. You got to rotate crews. You have to service these ships. You got to supply these ships. You got to fuel these ships. We're talking about a larger navy than the combined total of all the navies in the world by a multiple of I don't even know how many. And when it comes to them keeping the secret of this, I would ask Flunchy, have you ever heard of Bradley Manning, now known as Chelsea Manning, or Edward Snowden? Keeping a secret is inversely proportional to the amount of people that know that secret. And back to you guys. I'm sorry for butting in.
No, that's perfect, because that's outside my wheelhouse. Forgive the bad pun. So let's just go back to the Antarctic Treaty. So members of that treaty were Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, the United States. So if you're going to try to convince me during the height of the Cold War, and I was in West Germany with the Canadian military when the wall came down, so I saw the Cold War firsthand. If you're going to try to convince me during the height of the Cold War, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and into the 80s, the USSR had a naval flotilla or a military liaison with the United States, I'm just going to have to call bovine fecal matter, like legit. So the Antarctic Treaty, the Antarctic Wall, I'm sorry, I don't, and based on Schrodinger's calculations, like people can go to Antarctica, and sure, maybe it might be difficult to get to simply because of the distance and the logistics and, planes or boats and the amount of money, but I don't really see, a secret battalion of U.S. Marines or a regiment of British infantry being stationed down in Antarctica, working in cooperation with Japan, because magically Japan had to modify its constitution 5 years ago to get permission to buy certain pieces of equipment so it can patrol farther than 200 kilometers off its shores. Japan's constitution was changed after World War II, so it can never be an expeditionary power again. So the Japanese were violating their own constitution for 50 years.
Well, but here's the thing, then, when it comes to all that, how do you know that everything that's released to the public is the truth?
Post-World War II Japan? Oh, yeah. The only reason why Godzilla movies exist is we forced the Japanese to change their movie industry because we didn't want them making samurai movies anymore because that might be perceived as too martial, and the Japanese will go invade Korea again, and China again, and everywhere else again. So post-World War II, you had an American military presence in Japan and an international supervisory military presence in Japan, in some cases until the 70s. So if you're going to try to tell me the Japanese infrastructure, politically, militarily, somehow was involved in a military expeditionary unit, no. There's no way. And again, you're talking about keeping secrets over decades, right?
Yeah, I know. And like I said, I do understand where you're coming from with that. All I'm saying, I'm just questioning it. I'm just saying, how do we know for sure that there isn't stuff going on behind closed doors? Because, maybe there's just something more to this, because there could be an agreement for that. And again, too, all I'm saying with this is just what I think, because you asked before if there are people that believe in Antarctica or don't, whether it's an ice wall or not. And then, of course, the question with other flirts that we'll probably hear later on is about the dome and all that. I'm not even saying for sure that is the case. That's just what I've read and what I've seen. And I personally don't think you can go there.
Well, and I understand that if you want to look at flat Earth as a quote-unquote scientific model, per se, so we didn't understand radiation, right? We knew it existed in some instances, and there were some rudimentary experiments, but it wasn't really until about the 1840s that people actually understood radiation, at least what radiation was. And then the whole concept of splitting the atom, that was a mathematical equation on a piece of paper for 50 years. And people are like, yeah, maybe we can do it, maybe we can't, I'm not sure. But nobody knew exactly how to do it. And then World War II happened, and we had to build an atomic bomb. And so everyone needed it first. And so the Allies on the western side of the world gathered up all the scientists they could find, regardless of nationality, in some cases regardless of sex, and you had a small horde of ravenously intellectual people, and even then you had a debate about what the science was. But eventually someone did an experiment, and that was the first atomic blast in the middle of Nevada. And even then they didn't know what the experiment was going to do. But now, once we've done that one experiment, almost the entire field of physics has gotten into line and went, yep, that is exactly how it works. There's a couple offshoots here and there. Some of it's, someone that's been doing research and they're trying to promote something, or they're researching something that's so revolutionary, the science is kind of fuzzy and not a lot of people understand it. But if you're going to try to convince your average person that the atomic bomb doesn't exist, you have to rewrite science. So with flat Earth, you now have to throw out Copernicus, you have to throw out Galileo. Like, you have to go back to the basic tenets of astrophysics and celestial observation and go, that's all wrong. Like, I have a planisphere in my hand. I have a planisphere.
Sorry to butt in again, but I've got to read the super chats as they come in. Tim Pryor says there's even college trips to Antarctica. Seriously, flat earthers say they do this all the time, research, but obviously not. So Tim Pryor is saying that flat earthers do not do research, and I agree.
Well, all I'm saying is, how do they know that they're actually going to Antarctica? There are a lot of places on Earth that have snow. You can kind of go in what is seemingly a right direction. I'm just saying, how do they know for sure that that is Antarctica that they're going to?
They can shoot a bearing to the stars. But sorry to butt in again.
No, that's okay. Dude, it's your channel. So let's go back to what Schrodinger just said. So we have latitude, we have longitude, we have the star charts, we have the sextant, we have everything you can do. And with a properly calibrated timepiece, the charts, and the right equipment, you can calculate your position using 1700s technology anywhere in the world. Right? As long as you know what you're doing, you can chart your position. And again, I've had very rudimentary experience with some of these devices. I was mainly using a map, a compass, and a calibrated pace, and a set of binoculars to do my job. Very rarely would we have to involve sextants, although I did work with survey equipment, being an artilleryman. But like, I have a planisphere in my hand, and if I spin the whiz wheel on the outside ring of the planisphere, all the constellations change by time of day, by month, and so if the world wasn't round, why would you have a drastically different set of constellations in the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere? Because if the Earth was flat, Australia would not have a Southern Cross. If the Earth was flat, everyone would see Polaris, the North Star that's currently the North Star, until the next celestial realignment.
Well, yeah, see, that could be possible, but again, too, I mean, if you think about it, there's kind of perspective too, right? Like, because obviously I'm in Canada, so yeah, I can see so far away, but eventually the stars, whatever I can see from where I am, I'm obviously very far away from the equator, let alone anywhere in the southern part of the world, the southern hemisphere, whatever you want to call it.
But that only works if it's a globe or a spheroid or anything but flat, because if it's flat, there is no south. Right, there is no southern hemisphere because there is no equator. Right, the equator is the midpoint, top to bottom. Right, the prime meridian is the midpoint, left to right, so to speak. So if there is no equator, there is no southern hemisphere, because south is irrelevant because everything's flat. Right, because there is, under the flat Earth model, if the Earth is quote unquote flat, plus or minus 5 feet from either side, at that point, you wouldn't need a Southern Cross. Everyone would see Polaris. You just look up in the sky and go, North Star. But as soon as you cross that equator, right, and you get near the tropics, you no longer, and again, Schrodinger would know more than I, because I've never been to that half of the world, flat or otherwise. At that point, your celestial navigation changes because the constellations have changed, because you've crossed over the quote-unquote horizon, right? And once you've gone over that, if the Earth was flat, the constellations wouldn't change. You wouldn't need a compass that's orientated for sectors of the world. I wouldn't have to worry about buying a compass that's rated for the entire planet, or rated for just Europe, or rated for just North America, I would just buy a compass.
Well, no, and like I said, I get that, but I'm just saying it's like even if I go into a field right now and I just look at the horizon, I will see this. I will see the stars converge at the horizon, and I'm like, I mean, I highly doubt that those stars are all the way in Australia. I'm sure they converged before that, so I don't see why I really would see the South Pole, which is, as far as I'm like where I am, or would be, you know, what's called the South Pole, would be really, really far away. I don't see why I would see it anyway.
You realize Ursa Major and Ursa Minor are never on the horizon. They're always almost straight up. Like, those constellations almost never hit the horizon line, because the North Star is almost straight up. Like, you're looking on a 70 or 80 degree angle to find that star at sometimes, and sometimes you're looking at almost a complete 90 degree angle to find that star.
Yeah.
So those stars, no matter where you are in North America, right? Those stars are almost always straight up. So if those stars are almost always straight up, there's no horizon involved. So if there's no horizon involved, if you're in Australia, or you're in India, or you're in South Africa, or you're in Argentina, you should still be able to see Polaris. And we here in the northern portions of the world should be able to see the Southern Cross. So, like, just using celestial navigation and what rudimentary understanding I have from an actual practical knowledge of celestial navigation, if there was a quote-unquote flat temporal plane surrounded by ice or not, but if the Earth was flat, planispheres wouldn't work. Star charts wouldn't work, because Polaris would be a thing no matter where you sat, because those constellations can only change if the world is a globe or a spheroid. Like, it's anything but flat.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it would. I mean, we can go through it more later, but and you're right, it's true. I've never seen the Big Dipper or anything touch the horizon. But again, too, just where my latitude is, it just wouldn't get close enough. And I mean, the further away though, like the furthest south I've been is basically the southern states, and I mean, I've seen it basically scrape the horizon. So I don't see why the further south I got, it wouldn't eventually do that anyway. Just like same with the Southern Cross, the further north I got, why it wouldn't do the same thing. Just because, again, it's just getting closer to the vanishing point.
Okay, so I'm in Ontario. I don't know which province you were in.
Manitoba.
Manitoba? Okay, so I was stationed at one point in Shiloh, Manitoba, right? Where the battle school was for my regiment. I was also in Petawawa. I was also in West Germany when it was West Germany. Right now, I live about 140 kilometers north of Toronto, and 5 years ago, I lived in London, Ontario, which is south and west of here. So that's a fairly significant space gap between London and 140 kilometers north of Toronto, right? So, however, magically, I've moved north, right, significantly, about 450 kilometers. But the North Star's position relatively hasn't changed for me, right? When I was in Shiloh, Manitoba, or Petawawa, Ontario, or Lahr, West Germany, the North Star's position didn't drastically change for me, because again, you're still north of the equator, right? So if the Earth was flat, right, those positions should have changed drastically, because I'm moving in space and time. And using your model, if I understand this correctly, and if I'm misrepresenting it, please correct me, because I want to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting or strawmanning you or trying looking like I'm placated, because I truly want to understand this, because and I didn't even know flat Earth was a thing until about 2 years ago. So if the Earth is flat, I basically see a bubble of stars. Is that correct? Like, there's a certain bubble I get to see of the night sky? Is that the way you would perceive it? And those stars are kind of in that bubble that follow me around?
Pretty much, yeah. Like, I did see a video, and it kind of explained it, I think pretty well. And it's kind of like almost like a personal dome thing. Like, the further you go, just the closer we get to your horizon. And I mean, it's kind of, again, I've never been to the southern hemisphere myself, so that's why I'm a lot of things I'm saying are speculation. It's just that's just why I think the further you away, the closer it will get to the horizon, no matter which star you're talking about.
Okay, so at some point I'm going to see a constellation. Pick one. Let's just use Orion, because everyone pretty much can understand what Orion is and what it might look like in the sky, the bow hunter, right? And I pick that belt that has 3 stars, right? and I walk towards that belt. At no point is that belt ever going to find the horizon. You can I could start in Mexico and I could walk to Anchorage, Alaska. At no point is that belt ever going to find the horizon. And I can walk every day, do it on foot, so I'm just using my own locomotion, so I'll actually see how things progress, and it'll take me a couple of months, so the seasons will change. The only thing that's going to happen at some point, because of the rotation of the Earth, that constellation is actually going to get lost to me, because that constellation is now finding another side of the planet. But if I'm in my own personal bubble, and that bubble essentially follows me everywhere, it doesn't relatively change except for things are eventually expected to find the horizon, I can walk towards, and I'll even go hyperbolic. I'll start on the tip of Argentina, right? And I will walk from Argentina, not that I'm going to do this because we'd have to start a GoFundMe. I'll start at the tip of Argentina and I'll walk to Anchorage, Alaska. And at no point will any constellation that I'm using as a reference point ever find the horizon. Some of them might start out in the horizon in the early evening, right? And then they'll rise through the sky. Right? That's because of the rotation of the Earth. Some of them might start out high in the evening and start until morning, dip to the horizon. But again, that's rotation of the Earth. Nothing, because if this bubble essentially doesn't change, using your theory, if this is a personal bubble and I'm walking along all fat, dumb, and happy, I'm going to look at the belt of Orion and the one star in there that's called Betelgeuse, and I'm just going to keep walking towards Betelgeuse, and I'm not going to change my direction. I'm just going to keep walking at that star, and eventually the sun's going to come up and that constellation is going to go away. And then 2 or 3 months later, as I'm walking towards that constellation, it's going to keep shifting in the night sky until that constellation is lost to me, because it's now over the middle of the Atlantic or over in Europe or over in Russia, and then it's going to come back around. And so that's like, if you live in Manitoba, go to Mountain Equipment Co-op, right? Not that that's a plug for them, but I know they carry these. You can buy a little whiz wheel disc called a planisphere, right? And if you use a planisphere, right, experientially, you're going to find out that those constellations that you're talking about, they're never going to, don't care how long you walk. And if Schrodinger was in the Navy, regardless of his trade, right? If he's on a boat, and it doesn't matter if you're a cook or if you're a naval weapons controller or a hull technician, right? You're still having to do celestial navigation. You're still watching the stars at night. Like if you take a trip and you start out in Norfolk, Virginia, and you happen to end up in the Mediterranean 12 days later, and then you go through the Suez and you end up down by India, right? Eventually, those constellations change, and they change so drastically. It's because you've traveled the curvature of the Earth. And again, Schrodinger can correct me on that because he would have more direct experiential knowledge and practical education on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, if I
and-
could butt in for just a second. I was actually a surface warfare officer. So looking at the stars and navigation and time and distance to different places, that was, as the kids would say, my jam. Yeah.
Wasn't my side hustle, that was my jam.
Yeah. It's funny you said Norfolk, Virginia, because most of the ships that I was based on were out of Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah.
And we always went through the Med and through the Suez Canal, as we called it, the ditch.
Yeah, and at some point, but at some point you get to Bermuda, and the constellations you could regularly see start to change, and then you pass Gibraltar, and then you get around, the entrance to the Suez. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, the constellations that would be available to use as a reference object for celestial navigation, they change because you've traveled the curvature, right?
Oh, absolutely. And what we would do once a day, we don't navigate by stars though in the same way that we used to.
Mm-hmm.
But every day we would shoot bearings to the stars as a way to verify, because electronics, they get wonky from time to time. So we would shoot bearings to the stars just to make sure that they line up with what our electronics were telling us.
Well, and I was in the artillery, and we would do the same thing. So if you'd go on a patrol, when I was in, GPS was in its infancy, and when I took a
Hey
course.
guys, sorry, I just have to use the bathroom really quickly. Right back, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
And just this is basically about technology and nothing about the debate with the gentleman. We would use GPS, and when I took a certain course, the sergeant on my course that was our patrol commander, he kept the batteries for the GPS. Like, we signed for the GPS, he kept the batteries, and he'd say, give me a map spot. And you'd have to be able to give him, you know, a relatively accurate grid reference. And then we'd plug in the GPS and see if you're right, because eventually technology fails. And if you can't, you know, do certain tasks using basically 1800s technology, those computers are great, but they don't do anything for you. And if you don't understand the basics behind it, you know, in your case, you know, celestial navigation, shooting a noon bearing just to verify everything, you know. In my case, you know, going and using pencil and paper versus computers for gun data and things like that. It's a perishable skill, but it also verifies that your technology hasn't been corrupted or gone wonky or out of standard.
Right. And I was going to bring up something that you said earlier, because I finished up my career on the ground side.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking about pacing off distances, I remember learning that skill where you walk 100 yards, you know, or
mm-hmm.
something, you know, some known distance,
mm-hmm.
and you figure out how many paces that took you.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's how you learn land nav, you know, for everybody who's listening. You know, that's one of the things that you do when you learn land nav. You walk a known distance and you say, okay, this is how many paces it took me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you sit there with your compass, and you can correct me. You sit there with your compass and you say, okay, I'm going this direction. I went this many paces. Okay, I'm going to mark that on my little map. I'll go this many paces at this new bearing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly.
So it's funny how that works.
We used to use it for survey on the gun position. So you'd have 6 guns in a battery, and there's this, I don't know if they use it anymore, but we used to use what was called a central position and fuse correction graph, a CPNFC graph. So you'd have to chart the guns on the CPNFC graph, so the officer in charge of the gun position could look out of the command post and go, yeah, there are my guns. And the guns were numbered left to right in the center of arc. So the number 1 gun is on the left and number 6 guns on the right. I might have confused that. Excuse me. I've actually had a stroke, so that's why my channel name. But my point is, we'd have to know our calibrated pace while running, and you'd run from one gun to another, take a bearing, run to the next gun, take a bearing, run to the next gun, take a bearing, run to the next gun, take a bearing, and then plot that out. And if you're going on a patrol, I know if I'm going to walk, say 2,000 meters, okay, if I walk 2,000 meters, that's this many paces, so I'm going on that bearing for that many paces. And you'd walk that many paces and kind of go, yep, I'm out there on the map. And that's exactly what you would do. And if the Earth was flat, GPS also wouldn't work. I was waiting for you to get back from the washroom. Always, right? Or some people might call it the head. So do you understand how GPS works? Like the basics of the science behind the technology?
No, I mean, all I know is that I don't see the satellites that are moving around that are, well, apparently orbiting the Earth going, you know, whatever, 17,500 miles an hour can somehow have enough precision to tell us exactly where we are on the Earth at all times.
I'm glad you asked. I can actually answer that question. So
you can try.
GPS doesn't actually tell, like, so the reason why you need 3 or 5 or 7 or X number of satellites is because you pick up your cell phone or your GPS device or whatever, right? And you hit find where I am in the world. So your device sends a signal up to the GPS system, and the GPS system starts counting the number of milliseconds between each satellite responding, right? So the first satellite gets back to your phone in, 10 milliseconds. The next satellite gets back to your phone in 67 milliseconds, right? And so eventually your phone or whatever device you're using takes that calculation in seconds, figures the math out. And again, I'm not a mathematics expert, so I can't do that calculation. They figure the math out, it figures out the probability of error, and then it says you're about here, right? So if the Earth was flat, you wouldn't have the need for the number of GPS satellites because there would be no equator, right? So like basically my argument is, and I understand yours, like no one's seen the curvature, right? Like no one's actually seen it. And some flat earthers will say, and I'm not saying that you've said this or will say this, some flat earthers will say, well, all the images from NASA are garbage, or from the ESA are garbage, or from the Soviets are garbage, or from wherever are garbage, because they're all digital renderings and composites and mishmashes and collages. Okay.
Well, yeah, but it's also just the fact that, NASA has admitted that it's photoshopped.
But for the scale, just consider the scale. Just the scale alone required. No one has a camera that big, unless we call Mars, speak to the Martians, and ask to borrow the galactic camera. Right? Like no one has a camera that big. No one can like back up far enough to tell the Earth simultaneously to say cheese. So if you want to, then that's why I'm asking you these questions about science that works with navigation for the curvature. So if the Earth was flat, you would not need, and I have no idea how many satellites are in the sky for GPS, but I know for fact, you would not need the number of GPS satellites that have been put up there, right? You wouldn't need the number of GPS satellites to get an effective fix. You'd only need 3. You'd only need 3 to figure out your fix. But because you have the curvature of the Earth in 2 axes, right, north to south, east to west, you need more satellites. And so when you're on a warship in the middle of the South Atlantic, right, or you're walking the Pacific Coast Trail, or you're in the middle of the Sahara or wherever, right, and you want like, oh crap, I'm lost. Don't tell anyone I'm lost. Find me. You hit the little button and your device signals up to the world, right? GPS only works with the mathematics and the science it does with a curved Earth, right?
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, like, well, I would, but I'm saying I don't because I'm not saying GPS doesn't exist. I think it's all ground based. It can be on towers, like just like our phones are, and radios and all that. I don't see why it couldn't be. But it seems crazy that they would send information to each other and it would somehow just always, work out that it knows exactly where I am.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a question, and this is just a spitball, and this isn't a political dig or anything like that. How does GPS work in the middle of Afghanistan?
Well, if the Earth's flat, the signal can travel basically as far as the signal needs to until it just, starts to dissipate or gets too weak.
Okay, let's talk about the mountains.
Mountains? Well, I mean, again...
No, there's mountains in Afghanistan, right? There are no towers in those hills anywhere, right? No one's built them, right? And I only picked Afghanistan because it's an easy example and more people will understand that if I said the Sahara Desert, right? Because no one's building anything in the middle of Sahara, right? But Afghanistan, it's a populated country. It was fairly technologically savvy in the 70s and 80s, right? So when the British SAS or the Navy SEALs or the Royal Marine Commando or whoever, right, have to go and operate in the mountains of Afghanistan, right? They're taking satellite phones, they're taking radios, they're taking GPS, along with maps and compasses and all the other toys, right? No one's built a transmission tower in the middle of the Afghani mountains because no one's had any money or need to. The Taliban wouldn't because they didn't have cash. Al Qaeda couldn't; they didn't have cash, and no one else was just showing up like, "Hi, I'm here to provide you your United Nations funded satellite tower." So that ground-based radio wave wouldn't work. Eventually, it would hit the mountains and just dissipate. The mountains will act like a big reflector, and you're in the bowl, kind of like that movie Lone Survivor, right? They had bad comms, radio wasn't working, sat phone wasn't working, and that was all because of geographics. That's just where they were in the world. Everything sucked because of the ground they were on. So if GPS is ground-based, if it's a microwave requires line of sight. Microwave towers only work with line of sight. So you'd have a legit string of microwave towers that went all around the world. So that means you have an international GPS secret treaty. But how does GPS work in the middle of the Sahara Desert? Because there's no towers. Because microwave requires line of sight. Now, if you're going to talk radio, okay, we're talking UHF, VHF, ELF, or ultra low. Sorry, like which version of the radio wave you're talking? Because now, if you're going to talk radio waves, the size of your antenna matters, right? U.S. Navy submarines, they have to, again, Schrodinger would know more than I do. When those submarines at a certain depth, they spiel out an ultra low frequency antenna. The thing's probably 1,500 meters long because they need the length of the antenna to get the message because of the frequencies they're working on. So if it's ground based and it's radio, now you're talking about antennas that are 30, 40 feet tall all around the world. Well, again, there's no secret GPS treaty. So if it's ground-based, your reception is based on your antenna size, and your power is based on your battery size. How much energy can you put into your communication system? So your cell phone has neither the reception nor the power to hit space by radio wave. Like, it's not radio, right? So it's not like your cell phone has the juice to transmit. It's transmitting straight up to a satellite, and it's measuring things in milliseconds. So again, if you want to debate ground-based radio, I was an artillery communicator. I was my battery technical and signals NCO, right? We can debate. I wasn't a communicator by trade, but I know enough about it because I had to do it in my trade. If you want to talk radios, we can talk radios all day long. But again, GPS can't be ground-based because otherwise you'd have transmission towers, repeater towers. If it was radio-based, some schmuck with a shortwave radio in Idaho would have picked this up by now. It'd be like one of the number stations from the Cold War, transmitting beeps and dashes and random numbers. Right? You'd actually be able to physically find that frequency. So how do you keep that frequency secret? Because you can't. I can build an antenna. I can build a receiver. So if GPS is radio wave, it can't be microwave because that's got to be line of sight. And if someone accidentally walked into that radio wave, if it's microwave, you're going to kill them. So now it's got to be UHF, VLF, like some frequency. Well, if it's radio based, it's frequency based. I can build an antenna to get that frequency. But because it's satellite based, you could probably still build it. I don't have that expertise. Someone that's smarter than I am, like maybe Thunderfoot, could do it because he's like Wile E. Coyote super genius. But again, if GPS is ground based, and I'll just give you the presupposition, yes, it's ground based. Where's the infrastructure? Like, where's the infrastructure to do this?
Well, yeah, and I get that, but I'm just saying when it comes to ground-based, I don't know where every single tower is, and I don't think a lot of people know where every single tower is. I just don't see why it's that crazy to think that there could be some towers that are maybe just getting the signal there. And on top of that, do we even really know that at every single part in the mountains and in places where you can't get that line of sight, do we even know for sure that you can get the signal there?
Well, here's the thing, though. In order, basically, to dumb down about a 6-hour period of instruction on radio wave propagation and antenna theory, in order for GPS to be ground-based, you'd have to have a ground-based repeater station every 50 kilometers in every direction around the world. Be it flat, be it round, be it whatever, be it a dodecahedron, you would need a ground-based repeater every 50 kilometers. And that would be a 300-meter tower, so it had line of sight over everything. You would see, 300 meters, roughly 900 feet towers every 50 kilometers all around the world, because that would be the only way a ground-based system would be. And if it was ground-based, again, you'd be transmitting on a frequency that would be findable. And if it's a findable frequency, someone can jam it. Like, now you get into electronic warfare. So sure, we're not going to get into discussing the electronic warfare of satellite systems because that's not this purpose. But if it's a ground-based system, right, and it's frequency based, right? At some point, I can jam it, I can screw it up, I can play with it, So again, because GPS was only built for the military, right? It was built for cities. It was built for the mill, and then cities found out it existed, and they're like, hey, that's cool, we need that. And cell phones work on it. How do you think your cell phone knows? So when I go to Vegas to the SHOT Show, how does my cell phone know I'm in Vegas? Like, my cell phone tells me, like, as soon as I hit Vegas, you're in the United States. How does it know that?
Well, I mean, realistically, I'm not going to get into, like, I know this, but it's to say that you aren't getting a signal from something telling your phone to say, hey, you're in Vegas. Yeah, I mean, if GPS can tell you where you are, why couldn't those towers say, hey, listen, you're here?
Yeah, but I can turn on my phone every so often, and my phone will tell me where I am in the world. I don't really get a lot of cell reception, but, I've sneaked my phone on during an airplane ride because I needed a file off my phone. And, I hit the map function, and it's like, oh, look, it tells me exactly where I am. I'm somewhere over, New York State, and I left out of Pearson International Airport. So, yeah. Right. So,
but
again, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because if you're in the sky though in a plane, then there's no reason, like, that line of sight wouldn't be obstructed by anything anyway.
Exactly. But if it's antenna based, right, you now get into the problem like, well, how far can that radio signal travel up, right? Because eventually, radio signals that go up eventually hit interference.
I know, but I'm just saying, if you have satellites that are supposedly even higher up than that, and they can reach our phones and we're on the ground, why couldn't a plane, which is obviously a lot closer to the ground than a satellite, why couldn't you reach the signal there?
Yeah, but then again, if it's radio-based, some of those planes are going to have electromagnetic interference and unable to get the signal. So, so at that point, you now have aircraft, be it civilian, commercial, be it military, be it search and rescue, be it whatever. If it's radio-based and you need an air ambulance at a specific latitude and longitude, if the weather's bad enough, that's going to impact radio waves. Right? I have personally seen radios that are designed to transmit 30 kilometers get no more than 5, and that's because of weather, just straight out weather. It's a crappy 4 or 5 days. There's a lot of static electricity in the air. It's very humid. There's thunderstorms, and and the radios are like, yeah, they're crapping out at 5 to 10 kilometers, but it's doing a third of its range. So we're now back to World War I technology with field phones. Okay? So radio waves can be impacted by weather significantly more than satellites can. So again, if it's ground-based and it's radio-based, what are we dealing with? A fifth of the world's air traffic at some point can't get an effective signal due to meteorological interference. Also, radio waves, and again, Schrodinger may have more experience with this than I can because I was only working on the ground. Radio traffic at nighttime, once you hit the period of darkness, there's a certain definite influence over the nocturnal period that can have an impact on radio signal propagation, right? And so if GPS is ground-based, now you've built a system that has found a way to defeat that and defeat it constantly, but yet we can't build that into an AM FM radio. So, I can hear my favorite radio station during a thunderstorm.
Well, yeah, but I mean, maybe there's just more money put into it. I can't say for sure. I mean, this particular set is kind of getting a really in-depth here. I was
but you want to debate the curvature of the Earth. And I'm going to give you the supposition no one has actually seen the curvature of the Earth except an astronaut that's been in space, be it low Earth orbit, be it from a satellite, be it like that. Those are the only physical people that have actually seen the curvature, because you have to be so far away, unless we call Mars and borrow the galactic camera, right? Which isn't a thing. So the only way I can prove to you using technology that the curve exists is navigational technology. Because I'm not going to get into the esoterics of like why planes don't fly down or up or off the Earth or whatnot, because I don't know enough about aircraft and how they work. I know enough about radio waves and communication and navigation. So like if the Earth is flat, and I'm just going to give you the supposition for the purposes of debate, the Earth is flat. If the Earth is flat, why in Alberta or Manitoba and Ontario, you and I will almost share the exact same personal bubble for constellations in the night sky. Regardless of time of year, regardless of time of day, regardless of the month of year, you and I will almost share the exact same personal bubble for constellations. However, someone in Germany will have a completely different personal bubble for constellations. That can only exist if the Earth is round.
Yeah, and like I said, I get that, but I do get
hold on, Punchy. Real quick before you answer that, I think it's perfect time for us to go into question and answer. So let's have a quick period where you guys ask each other questions, maybe 30 seconds for a question, 1 minute for an answer, and then we'll get some questions from the audience. Of course, super chats will get precedence, but I'll ask every question as best I can. We've been going for about an hour and a half, so what are you guys thinking? About another 45 minutes, we'll wrap it up?
Sure.
Sounds good. Okay, so yeah, go back and forth, and while you're doing that, I'll write down some questions from the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Like, I mean, I get that you have a lot of knowledge in these subjects, because I guess that's a field that you did work in. And but with the dome thing and the star thing, again, I just think that's just a distance thing, honestly. I just think because in Germany, of course, they're going to see different stars because they're just really, really far away. Like, I can't get into every detail of it. I just don't see why on like what you guys think would only work on a globe. I just don't see why that wouldn't be a very similar thing with the vast distances involved. And it's funny that you brought up the planes needing to follow the curvature and all that, because I was going to ask you that next, but if you aren't 100% sure, then I won't. But
well, so like and again, I've flown an aircraft, but I'm not a pilot. The only thing I could possibly answer to that question would be, well, the pilots are flying relative to the horizon, right? So the reason why the plane doesn't like drastically dip up or drastically dip down or fly left or fly right, is because historically, before we built all the instrumentation, the pilots would just use what they call visual flight rules, and they would fly and use known landmarks as a reference point, and then they would keep the plane quote unquote level to the visible horizon. And then as technology progressed, we built better instrumentation, and we developed instruments where in some cases you could basically, black out the entire cockpit and have the pilot just fly by instruments. And again, they're using, like the instrumentation has accelerometers in it, it has gyroscopes in it.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about the gyroscopes there. So like if you're following the curve of the Earth and you're like, wouldn't the gyroscope eventually start to tilt backwards? Because, obviously as you're going, that gyroscope's going to start, its orientation is going to stay the same relative to where it started. So if that plane's following the curve, then you're going to see that gyroscope, if you're sitting in the plane, you're going to see it appear to start to move backwards. Yet gyroscopes never do that.
Is it relative? Now this is me asking a question because I'm not really sure. Is it relative to the position of origin, or is it relative to the craft that's moving?
Well, okay, so basically if you were on a globe Earth, right, and let's say I just had a ball in my hand and the plane was at the top of the ball, right? And so if I started to go down, let's just say I'm going, like if the ball's in front of you and you're looking at the plane from the side, and the plane started to go counterclockwise around the ball. Well, as it did, you would see the gyroscope stay the same, like it would still be horizontal as that plane started to go, but the plane would now be at it would angle 45 degrees down halfway. So if you're in the plane, the gyroscope would appear to have tilted back by 45 degrees, but we don't see that in real life.
Okay, I see that. As far as like the mechanics of it, I'm gonna have to give that one a think. So basically, if I understand it, you're saying that the angle that the plane is flying at would be so visible that the instrumentation, that being the gyroscope, would have to have like an equal and opposite reaction to it, right? So
because if you spin a gyroscope, it's gonna maintain its orientation, right?
Okay.
So with the plane, every single degree of curvature that it goes over, that gyroscope's gonna appear to, if you're in the plane, it's gonna appear to tilt back or forward depending which way you're going, every degree. But we don't see that in a plane.
Okay, so I'm just going to call my foul right now. I don't really understand degrees because in the military in the Army, we use what's called mils or milliradians. So in degrees, there's 360 degrees in a circle. In mils, there's 6,400 mils in a circle. And one milliradian, which is a mil, 1 milliradian in error equals 1 meter in distance at 1,000 meters, right? So basically the pilot, they're always making micro corrections. Right? And again, it's relative to the horizon. So the horizon itself doesn't really change. Like, let's say, for sake of argument, the horizon is at a constant 25 miles away from me. And I'm flying the plane, and the horizon's a constant 25 miles. I'm making my corrections relative to the horizon. So the horizon basically stays level. The only time I'm making a drastic, like up-down course correction where the fuselage is pointed at a fairly aggressive angle is when I'm making that initial climb from my takeoff altitude to my eventual cruising altitude, and then again the reverse of that when I'm going to find the runway to land on, or if I have to make a drastic, left-right bank where I've got to tilt the aircraft. But the gyroscope stays relative not to the point of origin, it stays relative to the actual plane of the Earth. I don't think it stays relative to your point of origin, because if it stayed relative to your point of origin, if you took off in Sydney, Australia, and you tried to land in Nova Scotia, your plane would technically be upside down and backwards, right? So I think the gyroscope, and again, I've never had any working sort of experience around a gyroscope that way, so I don't really know in specifics how that would impact it. But I honestly believe the gyroscope isn't so much, doesn't have an orientation to your point of origin. It has a relative orientation to the plane of the Earth. And so the plane knows if I tilt 15 degrees to the left, the gyroscope knows what is a true center versus what is 15 degrees. So that way when the pilot goes to make his correction, he knows, where to make the correction to. And that's what the gyroscope controls.
Mm-hmm. And that's fair. I mean, I'm not going to hold. I see a lot of flat earthers, and I see it from both sides, honestly. One thing I don't like is when a flat earther and a globe earther, when they'll, if the other side doesn't have an answer, they'll automatically go, so therefore you're wrong and your whole idea of everything is wrong. So I'm not going to do that. Yeah, you don't you knew a lot of the other stuff. So I will have to kind of look into that. And the pendulum thing. I mean, I guess I think that's a very good piece of evidence for the flat Earth. But if you're not sure, I mean.
Well, now my question to you is, right, because I'll be honest, I did not know the flat Earth was a thing until about 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, I had a stroke. I had to spend 6 months off. Oh, welcome to the club. And so I spent a lot of time watching YouTube while I was at home recuperating and getting sort of better. And so I'm watching these videos, and I'm like, okay, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. So I've watched that Netflix documentary. I've watched a lot of Mark Sargent. I would watch other channels that have picked the flat Earth apart, supported it, whatever. And I don't mean to sound patronizing. I'll just be honest. I don't get it. Right? I realize that science can be debated, and certain parts of science are fuzzy, right? Because there's a couple schools of thought. And some flat earthers come at it from a religious perspective because there's biblical or some form of scriptural reference that the Earth is flat and has a dome. I get that. And other people have it because of books they've read or articles they've read online or videos they've watched. But why is it there hasn't been a major scientific body that has credentials that's published a well-defended, peer-reviewed article that says, I can give you quantifiable data, this is a pancake, not a basket?
Well, we have seen that, though. There was that article that says Kansas is flatter than a pancake.
Kansas?
Yeah.
Yeah, but so you're doing survey over the entire state of Kansas.
Yeah.
Or the city of Kansas. So which Kansas are we talking? Because there's a couple of Kansases.
I'd have to reread it. It just said Kansas, so
okay,
I didn't.
So basically, if you want to say the entire state of Kansas is quote unquote flat, okay, having had to do survey, what's your plus or minus feet differential? How many feet in error are we talking about? Right? You know what I mean? Things are relatively quote unquote flat. Because if you look at a map, right, maps have contour lines. The contour line is every 10 meters. So that's 33 feet. So if there's a contour line and then you go across the map and 25 centimeters later, roughly 12 inches, there's another contour line. Well, on a 1 to 50,000 map, that's 25 kilometers. So in 25 kilometers, the ground only gains 33 feet. 25 kilometers roughly is 16 and a half miles-ish. So, if over, 16 miles, the ground only gains, 30 feet, it's going to, on a survey, it's going to look relatively flat. So it depends on what your contour interval, how many hundreds of meters or tens of miles do you have to go to get to the next contour line.
Yeah, and no, I know with the whole plus minus with the margin of error there. I know that it's not perfectly flat. I know there are valleys and hills and all that. I just more or less mean that if it's flat, I mean they didn't say there was any curvature or anywhere. If you're starting from one side of Kansas going to the other, in theory it shouldn't be flat.
Yeah, but again, they're doing survey in a two-dimensional model, right? In order for it to be flat, they have to do survey in a 3-dimensional model. Because survey measures it on an x-axis, right, going left to right, or north and south. A y-axis going, the other direction, so it forms basically a perpendicular cross. And then you're measuring height differentials between terrain features. Oh, that hill is 10 feet taller than I am. In order to prove that the Earth is flat or the Earth is round, you now have to do survey interplanetarily. You're going to have to park a satellite right above you, and you're going to have to ping the satellite to go, how far am I away from that satellite? And you're going to have to walk, 5 miles and do it again and do it again. So that's the only way to serve. So if you're doing like standard survey, it's done in 2 dimensions, and then you just account for elevations, right? So that in and of itself, it's like you go get a theodolite, and you go get measuring staves and all the equipment to do survey, and a couple packages of pencils and a calculator and a big bag of swears, because there's going to be a lot of that going on. And you spend 6 weeks doing a survey of Kansas. Yeah, it might be quote unquote flat, because you're not out there looking for a curvature. You're looking out there to find out, where's the next interval and contour, because that's what survey is. You're looking for intervals and contours, right? So you can draw, like, there's the river. So we know if we come to a river, typically the contours go down. We get to the other side of the river, typically the contours go up, right? So that's what survey is. If you want to do survey to measure quote unquote flat, you're either going to have to do it interplanetarily, right? Problem is, you're now going to have survey of that other object, so that's not relevant. So you're not going to have to park a series of geosynchronous, like statically located satellites, and do survey on the up-down axis from ground to whatever it is in the sky. And that might, again, I don't know how to do that, because I don't have that kind of mojo, but that would be essentially how you would have to do to prove the curvature. Because normal survey is not looking for a curve; it's looking for the next contour line, or where's that road?
Real quick, about another 5 minutes, and then we're going to go to audience questions. I've got a list. There was a couple super chats with no questions, so if you folks did have questions, then put them in there. And if you do have questions, get them in real quick, because we're about to go to questions in 5 minutes.
Sorry, just taking a drink of pop there. Okay, and I could see that. I don't see why they would personally do that. But I don't know. I mean, just do you have any questions?
Well, because I'm gonna be honest, because I don't really understand exactly. So, when we get into certain realms of modern science, like use medicine, for example, there was a lot of shifts in thinking about what a bacteria was and what a disease was, and how to cure things, and vapors and vespas and humors, right? And eventually science kind of codified, and it became a standard school of thought, and then created specialities. Now, granted, let's say the flat earth, the modern revolution of the flat earth thinking is 1950s thinking. Is that where it started? Is that when it started to redevelop, or is it more 1970s when you started out chat rooms and bulletin boards, or is it more, when did this whole revolution in flat earth thinking start?
Well, like I said, I kind of first heard about it 2 years ago, but from what I've heard is that it kind of came around in the early 1900s. It kind of made a bit of a resurgence. Okay. And I think it died down again, but then luckily, because now we have the internet, so you can find people's ideas and all that, and you can really start to see things. And like I said, just really looking into it, I just saw a lot of things that just didn't make any sense. And yeah, so because it's been around for a long time. I mean, obviously, since I'm sure since the dawn of man, whether you're biblical and you think that we were created, or whether you believe in evolution or anything in between, I'm pretty sure that one thing we can all agree on is that we didn't always live the lifestyle we live now. And it made it, for anyone who didn't have any knowledge, whether they were told it was a globe or told it was flat, you'd probably look at the Earth and just assume it was flat, first things first, right?
Well, from a personal perspective, depending on where you are, yeah, that as an individual, like being able to only see 10 to 15 miles in any direction, right? Actually, I thought of an experiment that would actually prove if the Earth is flat or not. And then just hear me out and tell me if you think this would be valid. So we go to the CN Tower, right, in Toronto, right? And we find buildings on the other side of the lake in New York State or Pennsylvania, wherever they are. And then we go to those buildings and we go to the roof. We get permission, so this is all done legal, right? And then we take pictures from the roof of those buildings with an agreed upon camera system. So it's all, you know, everyone's going to agree on everything. So if the Earth is flat, you know, you should have a certain fixed perspective from those buildings, regardless of zoom, right? And you know, and that perspective wouldn't change depending on the building you're in, or in some cases on the floor you're on. You should still be able to see the CN Tower. If the Earth is flat and you have a clear line of sight in front of that building, if I'm on the first floor, I should be able to see the CN Tower. If I'm on the second floor, I should be able to see the CN Tower. And if the Earth is flat, you should be able to see the CN Tower. And then, you know, if the Earth isn't flat, you can't see the CN Tower. And, you know, that's a 30 to 40 mile gap across Lake Ontario, I'm guessing off top of head. But we would have no problem sitting in one of the lounges on the CN Tower and, you know, simultaneously observe each other. That would be an easy experiment which could prove yay or nay.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's true. So I was getting a lot of messages here, but shut up. But I was gonna say, no, as far as that goes, like, one thing I've seen is a lot of times you just have something like, you know, say a zoom camera, like a P900 or P1000. You can usually bring a lot of things back into view. Like, I've seen, you know, because where I live in the city, so I can't really see the sun set past the vanishing point horizon, that kind of thing. So I can only see when it gets the roof of the houses, right, and the tops of the trees. But I've seen videos of people at large bodies of water, and if it looks like the sun's kind of starting to get below the horizon, you can they'll increase the zoom, and there you go, it's back above the horizon again.
Yeah, but you're now using mechanical intervention. Right? So that'd be the same if I'm on a ship using a telescope. And that would have been the same in Galileo's period. It wouldn't matter because you're now using mechanical intervention.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that doesn't prove that the Earth is flat. That just proves that from your perspective, using a Mark I eyeball, with or without prescription, right, using the standard human senses, you can only see a certain amount, right? As soon as you throw an optic in front of that, be it a camera, binocular, telescope, you know, some kind of like mechanical magnification device, it's not the horizon that's moving, it's your perspective that's moving, because you're now able to zoom in, right? You're now able to get closer to that image mechanically. You haven't moved. You physically have not moved. It's the mechanics of the device.
And that's exactly what I was saying, though, because I was saying it's your perspective, and that's why things appear to converge at the horizon. And that's why I was saying if you move further away from a certain point, it's not because of the curvature of the Earth. It's just because you're getting closer. You're getting closer to it, so now it's appearing to diverge rather than converge. Just like if you have something like a telescope or a zoom camera, you can now zoom in closer to it, where it's going to appear to diverge again rather than converge.
Okay, take 30 seconds to wrap that up, and we'll get to audience questions.
I'm just going to be honest, I don't know how to answer that off the top of my head. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how to answer that. So we can just go with questions. And if I can get an answer, I will message the gentleman in question.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we got some audience questions. If I missed any, I apologize. And if there's any more, then I'll probably miss them if they're not super chats, because I'll be looking at my notes. Ilya Moon, this was one earlier that I missed, and I apologize. For Flunchy, why are they faking it?
Well, I've heard a couple of reasons, and like some I agree with, some I don't necessarily. But the biggest thing is if they can trick you into thinking that the Earth, like the thing you live on, is something different than what you actually live on, then they can pretty much trick you into thinking anything they want.
Okay.
Can
Now,
I ask?
oh yeah,
What's the
yeah,
advantage?
yeah.
Like, so if there's a deception plan, right? If you're going to deceive someone, be it in a con game or politically or whatever, there's always a payout, right? So so what's the payout? And when did this? Well, hold on, no, but when did the deception start? Because NASA didn't exist until after World War II, right? And then NASA originally was a big cover story just so we could build missiles publicly, so the Russians wouldn't freak out. That's what NASA was originally built for.
But maybe that was kind of why. Maybe it's because at that point they realized that, hey, we're going to start needing money for this. So we kind of add to what we have. We can start getting money from the people, and we can even cover it up rather than saying it's all just for the military. We can say it's for something peaceful, like exploring, space or whatever. So we'll make up an agency and say they're doing that, and now we can take money from them with a lot less people complaining about where the money's going.
Okay, so on that note, how do you silence every sailor and airman during World War II and their experiences? Because there's no way that those individuals did not experience the curvature of the Earth during their period of service between 1939 and 1946. Like if you were in the Commonwealth military, or if you're in the American military for a shorter duration, there is no way that those individuals did not experience curvature of the Earth. So how are you going to silence, like, before even NASA's created? So I still don't get the payout. And who was responsible for this deception plan before NASA was created? The League of Nations?
Yeah, we can't go too deep into each question, or we'll be here all night.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and I have to apologize to my friends, Team Skeptic and FDFE, for when I've been on debates on their channel and they keep butting in. It's really, really hard not to butt in because I've got a lot to say about all this stuff. I hope I did a better job than they did, and I could throw it in their face that I was a better moderator than they are. All right, next question, still by Ilya Moon. Oh God, I can't read my handwriting. Oh, for Flunchy, she's got a bone to pick with you. Why do you say, in quotes, "I got that," and then don't have an answer?
Well, no, I'm not trying to say I got it as in like I have an answer for them. But when someone's explaining things to you or telling you things, and you just go, I got it. Like, as in I got what he's saying. I just don't think it particularly applies to what the situation is.
Okay. From Jolene, and every time I read that name in the chat, she's been quite active tonight. I just hear the Dolly Parton song in my head. Right. Kind of along the same question as Ilya answered the first question. Why do they hide the ice wall?
Well, again, they just hide it to try and, just so you don't know that they're lying to you. Again, that's why they have NASA or someone there in the Antarctic treaty, just to try and turn you away if you get too close.
Okay. Well, your interlocutor and I both know that how the impossibility of hiding something that large, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, your average private can't keep his lunch a secret.
No. Oh Lord.
Especially if they went to Burger King for lunch. They were happy when that happened.
Yeah, that's our producer. If you didn't know, that's Bullionator, our producer, who also served. So Factard for, I believe it was $8.99. If I could read my own chicken scratch. With all the evidence, how can you still be a flat tard? And that's for Flunchy.
Well, I mean, personally, like I said before, I can understand why you guys would think it is. I mean, they can be very similar depending on what you're talking about. I just personally see more evidence for it being flat. I don't feel the motion. Again, with the planes and the gyroscopes, if it were to go around an Earth, the gyroscope would drift, and we don't see that. And just, other things too, like gravity just really has a lot of holes in it, and a lot of it just makes absolutely no sense to me.
can you please describe a gravity hole? Like how do you find a hole in what is pretty much a common scientific model? Like where is the hole? How does it exist?
Well, it's just like with gravity. First you have Newtonian gravity, where it's mass attracts mass, but it's also an instantaneous force, right? Like according to Newtonian gravity, and what I've heard from the heliocentric model is if the sun were to just disappear, we'd go flying off. We wouldn't be in orbit anymore if it was a heliocentric model. But with Einsteinian gravity, there were to be the gravitational waves where they still travel at the speed of light, and so we would still follow our orbit for the next 8 minutes and 20 seconds. Then we go flying off. So that changes right there. And then also too, but you just look at things like sometimes things just completely seem to defy gravity.
But you realize science isn't in a vacuum, right? So when the science doesn't exist in a vacuum. So when Newton had his theories about how gravity worked, he used the understanding of the world and environment around him and whatever scientific instruments did exist at that time. However, they didn't have some of the mathematical revolutions, the scientific revolutions, the industrial revolutions, and then when Einstein came up with his theories, again, some of them were mathematical and theoretical. So because science is an evolving thing, like what, and I'm just gonna again go back to medicine, we didn't understand exactly what cholera was until someone stumbled on it and went, oh, this is why people die from cholera, right? And then we didn't really understand what polio was until about a little after World War I. We've eradicated polio because the science of medicine has evolved. So because Newton doesn't quite align with Einstein, it's simply a matter of their eras. One was in one scientific revolution and one was in another. Right? So one is basically a refinement, right? Because science doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Okay. Flunchy, please make a 5 or 10 second rebuttal, and we've really got to keep these answers a little bit shorter.
Okay, short and sweet. Basically, like you said, science evolves. So science has evolved, and now we're using Einsteinian general relativity. Why are we still using Newtonian if there's a new, better thing in place?
Okay.
Okay. Jolene gave a super chat with no question or anything. So thank you. Amy Nelson did the same. Thank you, Amy Nelson. Oh, God, my chicken scratch. Lavender Mexican for $4.99 didn't say anything, so thank you.
Just a little word of advice. Maybe next time, just
quickly.
have like a word pad open and just copy paste.
Yeah, good advice. MC Gabriel Rock, I assume this is for Flunchy. Other celestial bodies are spheres, but the Earth is flat. Question mark.
Okay, well let's say you were like tiny, like the size of a germ or something, and you're living on a pool table and you see the pool balls. Well, they're round. The pool table isn't. Why does the pool table have to be round?
Okay, thank you, Mark Sargent, for that answer. Pat, Jesus, my handwriting's terrible. Pat Dalitcher, how thick is the flat Earth?
Well, I mean, I personally don't know, but I know the deepest they've drilled is like 12 kilometers with the Kola borehole there, and I mean after that started to get really hard. So that I would say is still really up for debate, but I personally don't know that.
Okay. The last question that I have, and I'll look back at the chat again to see if there's any new ones. Robert Kozlau. Explain craters on the moon there, Flunchy.
Well, again, I think the moon is just its own light source. So the craters can just be a change in the light coming out of it. Again, I don't have all the answers. I'm not holding any glober to the same standard. I don't claim to know everything. I'm just kind of going more by what I see on the Earth. I just think it's its own light. I don't know for sure.
Okay. This isn't a question, but Ilya Moon says, Jolene, 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 I'm begging you, please don't take my man.
Jolene, Jolene.
So there's that. Let's see what else we got coming up. Oh, Pavlov's blurple cat wants to know what y'all's take is on evolution. That's just too big of a subject to get into.
It's not relevant for the purpose.
Yeah, maybe in a future debate. Jim VE7UV. Okay. What if the Earth's linear velocity at the equator is 1,000 miles per hour and still only one revolution per day? So I guess he's asking, going back to your centrifugal force. If you put the centrifugal force numbers into the equation, you're going to get a negligible centrifugal force difference from the equator to the poles, as I was talking about earlier with my measurements with my gunpowder scale, I think is what the gist of that was. Okay, Jolene is back. Oh, let me scroll. Okay, so she did have a question earlier. If a tree falls on a flat earther in the middle of a forest and nobody's around to witness it, does anybody care?
Yeah, depends on who the flat earther was, I guess.
Okay. I wonder when they will start. Pavlov's blurple cat is asking, I wonder when they will start using white phosphorus. I don't know if that's a military question or if he's thinking that flat earthers are going to start making claims about white phosphorus. I don't know.
Well, technically, under the Geneva Convention, you're not allowed to use white phosphorus on troops in the open, so we're good.
Well, yeah. I don't think flat earthers are bound by the Geneva Convention. So maybe the question was for them. Robert Kaslau, if a flurf is dropped on his head, would it make a difference? I don't think so.
If a flurf is dropped on his head?
Yes. If a flurf is dropped on his head, does that make any difference? I guess in his cognitive ability.
From what?
The cognitive ability from, it would be negligible, I suspect.
Depends on how hard he hit the ground, I guess.
Well, and my biggest, and just use the word gripe because that's the word that comes to mind. And I've enjoyed the conversation, don't get me wrong, but it seems like every time I try to ask a specific, you basically run to the magic 8 ball. Like,
Yeah, that's a tactic that we have all come to know and love.
And like I get the fact that the answer seems unclear or try again later, but at some point, just due to science, like forgive the flat Earth, forgive the globe Earth. At some point, both the globe Earth and the flat Earth have to come to a common point of scientific agreement. Like we both agree on. You don't believe in gravity. I don't believe in gravity. But there's got to be at least one point of scientific data that we can agree on, and then build arguments from there. So, like every time I bring up a point, you're like, "Well, I'm not really sure about that. I'm not. I don't really know." So it feels like you're running to the magic 8 ball yourself.
All right. This next question has a question mark at the end of it, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it as a question. I'm going to read it as a statement. So, Flunchy, you brought up the pool table a little bit earlier, and so I'm not going to read this with the question mark at the end. And so the question from TS, so Antarctica is the bumpers on the pool table. I'm reading that as a statement, so no response required.
Like, I get it. I mean, like, yeah, before, up until 2 years ago, I would have laughed too. It's just the more you look into it, just the less ridiculous it kind of seems if you start to really think about it. But yeah, no, I get it. That's fine.
Oh, okay. Got another question by Ilya Moon that wants to know where I got this awesome background that everybody on YouTube is seeing. And that was made by one Ilya Moon.
And it's really,
great.
really fucking awesome.
Great question, Ilya. And if anybody is going to have, you know, if you have a YouTube channel and you want some backgrounds, or if you're going to have a live show, or you need a thumbnail for a premiere or anything that you're doing, Ilya Moon is the one, you know, to get with to make that. So if you don't know how to get in contact with her, get in contact with me, and I'll put you in contact. For a negligible fee, she'll make you an awesome background. We're getting towards the end, unless anybody's got any more questions coming up. Robert Caslow wants to know, Flunchy, what are your credentials?
Well, I sat in my high school and I did a little bit of university, but like I didn't take science or anything in university, but I was in it for a little bit, and just, you know, with life and all that, I had to eventually kind of drop and go get a 9-to-5 job. Other than that, that's it. Just seeing stuff on the internet, and yeah.
Okay, well, I guess let's get a couple of closing statements from each. But before we do that, I want to say a special thank you to the man who stepped up and took the reins. You know, our Glober didn't quite show up. I'm not sure why. I'm assuming it was some sort of misunderstanding. Stroke Assaulter, sir, you did as well as any globe debater that I've heard against, you know, Christ Puncher, who's done as well as any flat earther that I've ever heard. You know, we had a great, you know, back and forth tonight. I didn't have to step in and do any, you know, moderating, so to speak. We just had a good back and forth. So thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. And at some point, you know, I'd like to sit down with you and compare notes, because we say, I think we got a lot of common experience between the two of us.
In some realms, yeah, I agree. Yeah, and this was completely not how I intended to spend my evening. I turned on your YouTube channel. I'm like, I'm gonna watch this because it'll be fun. And I'm like,
oh, and yeah, you were good. Like, oh, if I were you, I would have lost my shit halfway through that, if not earlier.
well, and I appreciate that, you know, people have different views philosophically, religiously, scientifically. But my biggest problem is if you're gonna come to this. And I've watched Mr. Sargent and other people, and that lady that magically disappeared from the internet, which was probably a globe Earth conspiracy, and she's, you know, now in some Russian prison in Chernobyl. You know, so, but my biggest problem with the flat Earth model is we're going to forgive the Antarctic bumper, right? The secrecy. So if NASA took up the helm on behalf of the Antarctic Treaty, which doesn't make sense because the Antarctic Treaty existed before NASA. Who was responsible for the secrecy before the Antarctic Treaty? Was that part of the Atlantic Accords? Did that come out of the Geneva Convention and the Helsinki Accords? Was that in like the secret documents of the Magna Carta? Is that in some like hidden book of the Apocrypha? In like if there is this massive multi-generational, multinational, multi-century conspiracy to keep this conspiracy a thing, you know, privates can't keep their lunch a secret. You know, so if this involves a Navy, right? Somehow the Air Force is involved doing airborne surveillance, right? So you've got some airman that's paid to watch a screen. you're trying to tell me he's not gonna, let out the bag. If you've got a Marine boarding force, someone's gonna eventually go, dude, I did cool shit on the weekend.
Right.
Well, and the thing is, there's really not a
Hold on,
lot.
Punchy. We're doing wrap-ups here.
So that's my biggest problem with your whole conspiracy is no. There's no way you're going to convince me, because the only way a job stays secret is directly equal to the square root of the number of the people that know.
Exactly. And before I ask you one last quick question to finish your wrap-up, NASA's budget is a rounding error when it comes to the DoD budget. It actually is. You can look it up. Yeah, Stroker. If you are Stroke, I keep saying Strokers. I keep thinking of
my actual name.
I keep thinking of Stroker Ace from what movie was that? One of the shit. Anyway, show your channel or whatever you got going on online if you have anything, and then we'll get to Christ Puncher for his closer.
Okay, so my actual name is Michael. I picked the title of my channel Stroke Assaulter because on June 21st, 2018, I had a stroke at work. Now I live in Canada, so my medical bills were almost non-existent. And if you watch the very first video on my channel, that's the day I got out of the hospital after having a stroke. And then my channel is about mental health, stroke recovery. Occasionally I have a rant video, and so my channel is basically about my journey or other people's journeys with some of the neurological, physical, psychological, sort of conundrums that might exist in a post-stroke world, and what recovery could look like.
Yeah, well, thanks for popping in and doing so damn well and saving my show for the night. Yeah, I had a stroke earlier today, but not in the same way that you did.
Well, if you're going to have one, make sure you book a good meal plan, because that hospital food sucks.
Yeah. Flunchy, say what you got to say.
Yeah, well, that was really good. I mean, like I said, props to you, because you kept your cool very well. I would have probably lost my shit. Like, half the stuff I said, I was literally face palming and trying not to laugh as I was saying it. So,
were you steel manning an argument, basically?
No, I was literally because like I said, I did hear about the flat Earth probably, honestly, about 3-4 years ago, and I've just seen so many debates and I've heard all their arguments time and time again. It's just so easy just to do exactly what they do.
Oh, so you had the cliff notes by Mark Sargent, like, oh, I need to pick up that cue card and read that answer now.
Exactly. And basically, it's just, yeah. And because you were being so polite and calm, I didn't want to be like one of those rude, because it was supposed to be me and Jack originally, and because he knew, I would have been a bit more of an asshole and kind of done that. But then because you were being so polite and all that, I was just sitting there like, I don't want to be rude and, give him a heart attack.
Well, dude, it's just like, that's just the next big, life check box. But like, I didn't, at one point, I'm thinking like, this guy's putting on the mic. Like, he's told, like, I'm thinking like, no, because you kept going, I'm not really sure about that. And I get that, because you are going to find some people in certain conspiratorial communities that are going to immediately run to the magic 8 ball, like, the answer's unclear. I don't know. Try again later. And because it's easy to avoid the answer and sort of dance around it. And at one point, I'm kind of like, no, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. But I was gonna say too. I mean, also like I was saying in the debate there at that one point, I wasn't gonna fault anyone for not knowing the answer to a question I asked, because just like vice versa. Like when I first heard the flat Earth theory, all the questions, like all their talking points, it's not like I ever thought about that in my day-to-day life, right? And because I don't have an actual university education, or I was never in the army where I had to navigate the world using the stars or anything, a lot of those things I just never really thought of. So to me, they weren't good questions in the sense that I was like, oh yeah, there was flat, but they were good in the sense where I was like, that is interesting. I'm curious as to what the answer is, right?
Well, if you want to do another debate like this, I suggest we do demon planes.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because, you don't need science. I'm just, cuckoo. Because, and I ran into the flat Earth for the first time 2 years ago. I'm lying in bed for 6 months off and on, and you need some activity. And I've watched all the reruns that there are, and I'm like, I stumbled on this video, and I'm kind of like, what the sweet no. And so I ended up stumbling, and I love sovereign citizens or free men of the land. I love that stuff. So.
Oh, then you got to love my channel.
I left a comment on the taser video earlier today, and I'm like, dude, did you just want to get tased? Like, is that like BDSM without a safe word in public?
he had it coming. I mean, he almost like tased himself.
And like some of them, they quote things that aren't even a thing. Like, oh, it's in the Magna Carta, dude. That only existed for 3 months, and the Magna Carta was a peace treaty.
Right.
So and it's and some of it's interesting, and some of it is an esoteric debate, and some of it's good kind of like bubblegum for the brain, and then some of it you watch Mark Sargent, and I've never met the man, I've never debated the man, I have no dog in this hunt or fight, but sometimes you just watch him and he'll like, well, you just don't know what you're talking about, and I'm like, but you're debating like that Dave guy who's got like sciencey degrees and stuff,
Yeah.
So.
Oh,
I was gonna say, and yeah, the first person on there when we started that was my girlfriend Ilya there. So props to her for calling my shit out on the moon.
Oh no, you were getting your ass kicked, and she dropped out. To the great relief probably of you.
Yeah.
So Stroke, if you didn't know. And I suspect you didn't. I hope we didn't just blindside you with this, asking you to come in. But this is an ongoing thing this is the second debate that I've hosted between a Flat Earth debunker and a Flat Earth debunker, with one of them playing the part as a Flat Earther. And it's my attempt to prove that the actual Flat Earthers are so lazy that any Flat Earth debunker can be a better Flat Earther than a Flat Earther.
Well, I watched the last one actually, and I'm like halfway through, I'm like, and then it ended, and I'm like, oh no, you didn't. Like, you just broke the fourth wall, and I'm just like, okay, great. And I'm like, okay, great, moving on. And so I saw this one pop up earlier today, and I'm like, yeah, I'll watch it. And I had no idea what I was walking into, and then when the young lady bumped out, not realizing you're possibly creating a domestic dispute between two people. So it's just word of advice: keep your eyes peeled about people that have access to your toothbrush. Just saying. So, and she dumped out, and I'm like, you know what? Let's try it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I have another stroke? Like, shit, I've had the first one. The second one's easier. Maybe I get for ice cream. So it was fun, because at some point I'm thinking, this is a real debate. And then another point I'm like, I have no idea. This is a real debate. I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, and I also think
for that 15 minutes there when I was debating Punchy, when I was waiting for somebody else to please click the link, I was actually, saying, like, bringing up the same claims, and having to actually, debate and bring up logical, scientific things as if I were debating any flat earther. So a fake flat earther is indistinguishable from a real flat earther. And that's what I'm trying to prove here. And actually better. I mean, Stingray and Punchy both proved. I had a harder time debating Punchy than I have had debating any flat earther. But let's get maybe 2 minutes from each of you, and then let's wrap this thing up.
Okay, I just want to say one thing quickly here. So yeah, and it's funny because when you're talking about just different wavelengths and all that, and like radios and satellites and all that, everything you were saying, it just made so much sense, and I was like, fuck, I was like, how do I kind of go around this without just saying I don't know? So I was struggling just to find some way to make it sound realistic. But then I was thinking, too, at the same time, a lot of flat earthers do straight up just change the subject. So I was like, maybe I should just do that. I don't know. But,
No. I'd like to thank you both for this opportunity, not realizing I was walking into a shell game. Didn't realize that. and it was.
Yeah, thanks for not being mad at us.
I will be later, but I gotta call a guy. Things are gonna happen.
Okay.
Luckily,
I
the
got
COVID.
guns, so.
Oh shit balls! I'm in Canada. We can't technically have them anymore. But so it wasn't intended how I was gonna spend my evening, and so I figured I'd try this out and see what happens. It's not sort of my wheelhouse, my content, but I'm like, well, let's try it. And when you started going to the I don't know stuff, and I'm like, he either legit doesn't know, right? Because he doesn't work around it, or if he is a flat earther, he's trying to run to that magic 8-ball. Like, well, and I'm expecting you to change the topic. And every time you try, it's like, well, the curvature of the Earth. I'm like, I'm going to give you the presupposition that no one can see the curvature of the Earth because I can't argue that the curvature of the Earth, right? Unless you're like Neil Armstrong. Unfortunately, he's dead.
Oh yeah. Speaking of idiots, multi-tom-tom is in the chat. So,
what's a multi-tom-tom?
He's a long time flat earther who's either the dumbest human being that has ever turned oxygen to carbon dioxide, or he's a Poe. And in either event, he needs to apologize to a tree.
Yeah, so
Struck, did I hear you say earlier that you have been to the SHOT Show?
Yeah, I was at SHOT Show in 2018. Yeah, it was supposed to. We're scheduled to go this year, but with the global situation, pandemic thing, we don't.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you and I are probably the only people listening that know what the SHOT Show is. So for everybody listening, the SHOT Show is a big-ass gun show.
And it's outdoor equipment. Like if you wanted to buy a helicopter to a backpack, but it's for retailers, right? So you can't actually go into the show and buy anything. So.
Yeah. So it's a gun show on steroids. Is what we'll call it. So unless anybody wants to stay around and pick on Multi-Tom-Tom, who just wrote "Space is fake though," and he spelled "though" wrong, then we could wrap this up, or we can kick around Multi-Tom-Tom for a bit.
Citation needed.
Yes.
So, okay, I'll give you the presupposition. Space is fake. Show me the document. Like, produce me a PDF written by someone important that I can fact check.
Well, if you're kind of newer to this, one thing you'll love, the biggest reason they claim space is fake is because there's no container, and that it violates the second law of thermodynamics.
That's because they don't know what the second law is. He just wrote oxygen is overrated. Now, see, that's just a Poe statement.
Yeah, come on, like you're not even good at this Multi-Tom-Tom.
Is this the real Multi-Tom-Tom, or?
Well, so is a sperm donor, but we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
He's gone.
Yeah, it looks like he's out of here. Okay, guys. Thanks for showing up. I'm planning on doing this again soon. I got a couple people lined up. Let's hopefully, Jack gets back with me, and maybe he thought this was going to be tomorrow night. I don't know. But thanks everybody for showing up. I'm going to drink my brain into oblivion after this.
Well, you guys have a great night, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir, for showing up.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Super fun.
Absolutely. Okay, Dave. Thanks for producing, and I'm sure you got a couple lines you want to say before we all get out of here.
Well, one to our unsuspecting Glober, thank you again on my behalf for coming in, because I work with both these guys on another channel, and it was really hard to sit here and not laugh my ass off the entire time when Ilya was debating Punchy. That was hilarious. But it's a good thing that Schrodinger's doing this, because it just shows you cannot tell who's a Poe. That's how stupid it is. So, and other than that, I don't have a lot going on other than my usual this weekend. This was a lot of fun. I enjoy doing these for you, Schrodinger. And
absolutely, show your services out. real quick, in case anybody's out there that wants to do some live streams.
Yeah, if you want to do live streams and you either A, don't know how, or B, just don't have the time to do it yourself, I'll do it for you. Contact me, booleaninator@gmail.com. I'll go ahead and put it in the live chat. And I am available, and we'll work on a time of your choosing if I'm available.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm probably going to get with you this week, Bull, and after I talk to PhD Tony and Dr. Phil Bell. I'm thinking of a show maybe for next weekend, so I'll be in contact with you.
Cool.
And with that, let's get the hell out of here.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye, bitches.